Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Danila, and I do apologize for not being able to be there in person. I was coming from South America, and the airline seem to be less and less reliable these days. So, regardless, I'm very happy to be here and be able to share a little bit about what we do at Plataforma, and wanted to thank every one of you, especially Danila and the team at Connect Solutions at the Brazilian consulate there in Atlanta, for the opportunity to speak. So, without further ado, I'm going to share a quick presentation that we've put together. And so, as Danila mentioned, my name is Gary Carrier. I am the founder of Plataforma, which is a global education and employability program for software developers. And I'm here today to talk about a little bit type of a different investment in Brazil, more specifically an investment in the country's human capital, and how through technology we can create solutions that essentially change lives, but also service the needs of the market at the same time. Now, why software engineering? Software engineering is one of the most lucrative professions out there. Really, a career in IT can be very, very lucrative, but it's also one that does not necessarily require a four-year degree. And the reason is because technology is changing so rapidly, and it's creating a wide demand for these types of professionals who must constantly sort of stay ahead of the curve in terms of knowledge and skill set. And so the growing demand for these types of professionals, coupled with the rise of remote work, is really causing more and more companies to go and look for software developers outside of their existing markets, i.e., offshore. But finding, screening, and hiring talent in places like Brazil remains a challenge for many companies. And this is where Plataforma comes in. We help U.S. companies tap into the over 500,000 software engineers in Brazil by providing the vetting, the screening, the HR, the legal compliance, all the bureaucratic stuff, the payroll service, all for a fraction of what it would cost to hire locally in the United States. But the interesting thing about software engineering is it takes little more than a laptop and an internet connection to learn, which means with a lot of determination, you can pretty much build a career in this industry regardless of where or how you were born. And this is where things get interesting. So to illustrate this, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. This friend of mine, his name is Aurelio. And Aurelio is a 25-year-old software engineer at a really hot venture-backed startup out of Florida. He's working remotely for that company as the tech lead. Now, this startup just received investment from Google. It's growing like crazy. But 3 years ago, Aurelio was working at a fast food restaurant. He was making minimum wage. Today, Aurelio is making more in a month than he made the entire year doing that. And he's doing it all from a pretty unlikely place. He's doing it all from here. This is Favela da Rocinha. This is Brazil's largest slum community. And it's where Aurelio was born and raised. And it's where he continues to work remotely for the startup as its tech lead. What's more is he's trained, hired, and onboarded 3 other software engineers to his team, all of whom come from favela communities. Now let me tell you about another friend. His name is Arthur. Arthur comes from a favela in the north end of Rio de Janeiro called Jacarezinho. And if you spent any time in Rio or in Brazil, you've probably heard of this community on the news. It's one of the most violent places in the entire country. Arthur was just accepted as a senior software engineer. He just signed the contract for a $1 billion startup in São Paulo called Bank C6. 3 years ago, Arthur was unemployed. Now, I bring both of them up because both Aurelio and Arthur are graduates of Plataforma Impact, which is our nonprofit arm that establishes technology training centers in favela communities in Brazil to help prepare young people for a career in this field, in IT and software engineering. They are both what we call also Jedis or mentors, right? These are people who act as facilitators, who teach, who help to give classes, who help to inspire, who help to motivate. Because what happens a lot of times is that people who come from these types of communities, they don't know anybody who works in IT. They don't know any software engineers. So we want to change that. We want to change that by taking these positive examples and bringing them back to the community to show that it is possible to launch a career in this sector, no matter where or how you were born. But what Aurelio and Artur really are is living proof of our core belief. And that belief is that talent is evenly distributed. Talent is everywhere. It's opportunity that's not. But when we use technology to increase access to opportunity, everybody wins. And it's interesting because it reflects something pretty fundamental about how we think about things like technology professionals. To be a great technology professional or to be a great software engineer takes a lot more than just coding knowledge. You have to be a creative problem solver. You have to be somebody who works well under pressure. You have to be somebody who interacts well with others, who's a team player, and most importantly, somebody who can think outside of the box. And when you grow up in poverty, when you grow up in a place like a favela, it's oftentimes you have these skills by virtue of living circumstance. And in the age of $100 laptops and ubiquitous wireless, we can help people develop these hard skills to complement those soft skills and thus lift themselves and their families out of poverty while at the same time providing valuable talent to companies around the world. The first time I entered a favela in Brazil, I was so impressed with the human ingenuity in the face of so many complex challenges. So for me and for us at Plataforma, we see those types of communities, which are numerous across the country, as vast gold mines of untapped human potential. And the picture that I showed previously of the favela, just that one favela has 150,000 people in it. And that's one of over 2,000 favelas just in Rio de Janeiro alone. So by leveraging technology, we can sort of marry two massive problems, one social and one market, under one common solution. Now, the market challenge is one of talent, one of supply. And the sort of demand for these types of professionals and the gap between demand and supply is only growing. We're going to need 3.5 million professionals in this by 2025. And what's staggering is that 50% of the vacancies in IT can't be filled right now because of lack of qualified talent. What's more is that IT is one of the least diverse sectors out there. So we have this massive challenge in terms of the market, in terms of supply of these types of professionals, and the fact that technology is changing at an increasing rate means that this problem will only grow bigger. We also have a massive social challenge. 110 million people in Latin America live in these types of communities. But what's interesting now is that 85% of the region's urban population, Islam and otherwise, now have access to the internet. So this opens up a world of possibilities for us to be able to create solutions in which marry these two problems. And that is what we call the win-win. So by connecting these high potential, hardworking, very talented, low-income youth to certified training, to professional networks, and to employment opportunities in the market, we both break generational cycles of poverty. We help clients and companies discover great talent, and we help society by creating happier and more productive members. We really call it a win-win-win. And before I wrap up here, I want to share one last story with you, and that is the story of Mateus. Now, this picture came up on my LinkedIn feed not long ago. And Mateus, I remember about 1.5 years ago, was going through our program. And Mateus was a motorcycle taxi driver in his favela. And as part of our program, They not only have to do sort of synchronous and asynchronous training, both self-study and online with professors, but they also have to interact with mentors, participate in workshops. And I remember in one of these workshops, Mateos being online, and he was in the pouring down rain in his motorcycle helmet, doing his best to participate. And he had told me several times that he did not see himself doing that for the rest of his life, being a motorcycle taxi driver, which is why he was so adamant about going through our program and succeeding. So this photo came up, and I immediately shot a message to him, and I said, Mateos, where are you? And he said, I'm in the mountains of Chile. And I said, that's great. I'm assuming you brought your girlfriend, right? And he says, no, yeah, I brought my dad. It was basically the dream of my father to see the snow. And now, having gone through Plataforma, having met you, and I now work in IT, I'm a software engineer, and I have basically the conditions to be able to bring my father to see a lifelong dream of his, is to see the snow. It's our first international trip. And so, yes. Sorry, I can't hear you guys, but I see people clapping. I think that's a good thing. So yes, these are the types of stories that are being created through our program. And I have to say that over the past few years, as CEO of Plataforma, I've been blessed to meet hundreds of software engineers like Mateos all over Brazil. From places that when you think of an IT professional, when you think of a software engineer, you don't really think of these types of communities. But it's given me the chance to see just how those different life experiences can actually come together and add value and create better outcomes and better solutions for the companies that they work for. And so with the rise of remote work, the growing number of companies that facilitate that remote work, like Zoom and Slack and Deal, which makes essentially working with distributed teams easier and easier, and the growing evidence that diversity leads to outsized success and outsized returns, I think making investments into the vast amount of what we call untapped talent that exists in Brazil today is something that everybody should be thinking about. But don't just take it from me. I think it's important that you hear from some of those who I've talked about today, which is why we've prepared a short video with some of their testimonials. And I'll pass that over to Danila to be able to show the video. I think I need to stop sharing my screen. Is that correct?
I'm Aurelio. I am 24 years old. I live in Rocinha, Rio de Janeiro, the biggest favela of Brazil, and I'm working with software development. Há 2 anos atrás eu estava trabalhando no fast food, ralando lá umas 10 horas por dia ali para ganhar um salário mínimo. De agora, eu trabalho numa fintech aí americana.
Helping people develop and learn a new professional in a market that is growing a lot is something that has a huge value.
Aurelio is a really incredible guy, and he was just looking for opportunities to improve himself. He found that through us, and then he was looking for the next opportunity to prove himself professionally, and he found that with you guys.
When I came to Plataforma, I received mentorship, I received guidance. I became a mentor to help other people that come from similar community.
We take a collection of the previous students and we ask them to be what we call Jedis. Those Jedis are people who have gone through the course, who are now achieving things that were seemingly impossible a year ago. We give them the tools and the resources that they need in order to inspire their own individual communities.
Jedi mesmo, são verdadeiros mestres, porque eles guiam a gente de uma forma legal, eles assim, não é que eles tenham todo o conhecimento do mundo, mas eles te fazem chegar no conhecimento.
Hoje eu percebo que não depende só de ser sozinho. Ter uma rede de apoio, estar em conjunto, ter a quem recorrer.
Eu ainda estava meio incrédulo de que eu ia conseguir. E ver todo mundo falando assim, não, quando você estiver trabalhando, esse quando era o que me chamava a atenção. Porque não era uma condição, não era tipo se. Todo mundo confiava que eu ia conseguir.
Hello everyone, my name is Arturo Alentejo. I graduated as a developer on Plataforma Impact. Soon after, I became a Jedi. Today, I work at a company called The Members as a tech lead.
Tudo que eu consegui, todo o valor aí que eu consegui agregar para a empresa, todo o valor que eu consegui agregar para minha vida e para minha família, foi graças a essas pessoas que me ajudaram.
It's really nice to see how engaged they are. Be able to help them evolve and learn from them is amazing.
There's no bigger inspiration for a student who's coming from a favela, trying to learn software development, than to see somebody who comes from a similar circumstances, similar background, so that they can recognize themselves in the other. That's how we keep students motivated. That's how we inspire people. The consistency is important, but if you have those examples, that's what's going to get you through the dark nights and the difficult times.
Agora eu tenho que fingir que eu tô trabalhando, né?
Hello. Oh. Thank you, Gary. Any questions for Gary?
Gary, what was your greatest challenge in two parts? One, initiation, and as well as running your company currently. What are your challenges or greatest challenges? And perhaps how did you overcome them?
Great question. So, number one, the greatest challenge from the beginning when we started was to put these young people into the job market. It was very, very difficult to get them jobs, principally because of the fact that most of them who had come from favelas didn't have any experience yet. And so we had to find and discover innovative ways to sort of circumvent that. We started the nonprofit arm first to provide the training. But when we come up against the barriers of the market, which, companies are understandably reluctant to hire people who don't have any experience, we ended up having to pivot a bit and create programs that incentivize these companies to hire people that didn't have any experience and give them a chance. This is essentially when we started our for-profit arm. The for-profit arm not only services clients by providing more senior engineers, but it also provides a way for us to offer scholarship opportunities internally within our company for those students who come from the training program. It also provides a source of sustainability for the nonprofit arm. And so doing that created a second challenge, which was how do you hire in Brazil for U.S. companies? Which nowadays we have the fortunate reality of having a lot more tools now, right? We have companies like Deal, we have companies like Oyster who facilitate the hiring of individuals abroad in different markets. And so by sort of coupling that service and providing both the vetting and the screening, but also a lot of the sort of bureaucratic headache piece of things, the legal compliance, the payroll, all of those things that I mentioned during the presentation, companies were a lot more adamant to hire because of the cost savings, but they were also more adamant to hire senior engineers as opposed to junior engineers, understandably. So that's when we sort of went up market and started sourcing from the wider market those senior engineers, which then in turn provided the opportunity for us to offer scholarship opportunities and internship opportunities for those more junior developers.
Thank you, Gary. I have one question. I would like you to tell us how all this began and what inspired you to start this such amazing initiative.
Thank you for the question. So, short story long, I in a more adventurous part of my life, I lived in one of those favelas for about a year and a half in my earlier 20s. And at that time, I was involved with many social projects, right? I was teaching English. I started a Muay Thai kickboxing club. I do jiu-jitsu, so I was always involved in that. And I just noticed the massive amount of what I said earlier is like the untapped potential, the talent, right? The resiliency, the outside of the box, the creative thinking. I mean, those places are very, very dense. Some of those buildings are 7, 8 stories tall, and they have one street running through it, the rest of this intricate network of alleyways. Just watching somebody move a house in that community requires a whole lot of outside of the box thinking. So subsequently, living in Silicon Valley, working in tech, hearing about the tech talent crunch and the fact that more and more companies were looking to outsource developer talent or software engineers because the fact that it was so cost prohibitive to hire locally kind of sparked this idea of, well, what if we gave those people in the favela the hard skills that they need to be competitive in the market, since they already have a lot of the soft skills that we're talking about here. And so that's when we started the first coding boot camp in the largest favela in Brazil. We have them in 60 different communities now. But that's the how it started immediately. The inspiration actually came from the fact that we do this to break generational cycles of poverty. And I am a product of somebody who broke the generational cycle of poverty for my family, which was my grandmother. And so my grandmother was the strongest, most hardest working person I had ever met, and is a huge inspiration for me and for this company. And so just by seeing what I'm able to go out and do with my life because of the strength of somebody like her, really gives me a lot of inspiration, because that's what we're doing every time you see somebody like Mateus, or every time you see somebody like Aurelio, who's getting ready to buy his mother a house outside of the community now. The ripple effects of that type of work go off into wider society and off into the universe to create things that we may never see. And so that inspiration from my grandmother, coupled with those experiences, is really how and why we started.
Thank you so much, Gary. One more question here.
Hey, Gary. As a Brazilian, and thank you so much for the investments you're making in my country. I really appreciate that. It's a very interesting business model, but the question that comes to mind is about screening. You need to find someone that is able to learn English, learn coding, needs to be a team player, needs to be an out-of-the-box thinker, as you just said. It's very hard to find those individuals anywhere, right? So I'm very curious to know a little bit more about your screening process.
Absolutely, and that's a wonderful question. Thank you for that. The screening process can be very laborious and very time-consuming, because what's on paper is not always actually the reality. And so I'm glad that you asked the question, because that is sort of the next piece of the puzzle that we are putting together. So essentially now we are developing an automated matching system that it will automate as much of that screening process as possible. And so using artificial intelligence to do the analysis for the English compatibility, also using sort of third-party vetting services for the technical analysis. There's more and more companies out there. HackerRank is one, DevMatch is another, that we are going to plug into the system to be able to analyze the sort of tech skill set. And then that filtering process there is the automated piece, and those who make it through that will then be invited for an interview, in which they'll do some sort of live coding and answer more sort of direct questions about the team that they'll be joining. And so all of that is very similar to the way that we do the education programs in the favelas. We want to democratize opportunity to as many people as possible, but just like with anything else, a lot of people will start and few will finish. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't give everybody the chance. It's just that we have to automate the top of that funnel as much as possible and dedicate our financial and human resources down to the bottom part of that funnel, the people who make it through that process. And so both on the education side, that's where we really start to invest our time and our resources, is down at the bottom of that funnel, and also on the vetting side, which includes both the technical analysis, the English, and then the interview. And then assistance with the onboarding process for the team is where we will dedicate a lot of our human and financial resources there at the bottom of that funnel.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much. Ron, one more question.
What does Plataforma look like 5 years from now? I think he needs to...
What does Plataforma look like 5 years from now? Wonderful question. Thank you for that. So I think one of the things that I'm most excited about is this automated matching system. Not that it's completely innovative. There are other companies who have done something very similar. But I am very excited about the ability for that system to also give more transparency and visibility around the social impact that's generated by those hires. And so if one of you hired a series of developers from us, you would be able to see, how many people got access to IT education, how many people got jobs, what the average salary increase was, some of the stories behind that impact. In addition to being able to solve some of your more immediate talent needs, you would have sort of essentially curated reports of the wonderful stories that are generated behind the social impact arm of our organization. And so the vision has always been to be able to take this model across the region, also in the United States. We have a lot of people who live in poverty in the U.S., a lot of very talented people who live in places like Atlanta and Las Vegas and other cities in the U.S. And so to be able to expand this model, and also to be able to expand the system that will do the automated matching, and leverage AI as much as possible to help in that process, while also giving visibility to the beautiful things that are being generated behind the nonprofit arm. Sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
What do you need to accomplish that? Do you need, yes.
So we operate the hybrid model, the nonprofit and the for-profit. The nonprofit is not entirely self-sufficient yet, but the path for the future is to have our for-profit arm sustain that nonprofit. So we still are dependent on donations on that side, but on the for-profit side, we need more business development. We need more clients who are in need of either solutions or staff augmentation services for existing engineering teams. So those two things are really what we need is continued support for the nonprofit, but also clients who are in need of technology solution services on the for-profit side.
Gary, it's a simple question, but I'm a bit intrigued by the language skills, because when you talk about English-speaking people in Brazil, it's not easy to find. And then you go to the favelas and you find people that can speak English. How do you do that, or you develop them the language? I'm just trying to get that point. Thank you.
No, it's a great question, and you're absolutely right. Brazil still ranks very low in terms of English speakers, but I will say that that's changing. I've been going to Brazil for more than 10 years now, and I saw it back then, and I'm seeing it even more now. And that is more English speakers sort of by way of serendipity in terms of access to media and exposure to media. So I nowadays will meet people who speak English fluently, just like you and I are now. And I'll ask, hey, how did you learn? And well, I grew up playing video games. I remember meeting a little girl in the favela years ago who spoke fluent English, and she told me it was from all of the Disney movies that she had watched. And so I think it continues to be a challenge to find great English speakers, but I do think the tide of that is turning by way of just access to media and exposure to English-speaking content. I mentioned that 85% of the people in favelas now have access to the internet. A lot of them are playing video games. A lot of them are watching English content. And so I think that in the future, we will see more and more English speakers coming out of Brazil, which will make our job easier.
So one more question to finalize this section, and we move to the panel.
I was just wondering what the role of the formal education system is. Do you work directly with high schools, colleges, or are you operating pretty much outside of that?
Yeah, we are operating pretty much outside of that. We haven't had any real contact or partnership opportunities with the school system there. I mean, many of those who have exposure to the public education system in Brazil know that it's not good, especially for those who live in favelas. I mean, most of them are either going to school in the morning or in the afternoon, and those are both part-time. And that's when teachers show up. So it's very, very difficult to work with the public school system in Brazil. And we, like I said, haven't explored that, so we're operating pretty much autonomously. But what we do is we go into these communities and we find who sort of the community leaders are, the people who have strong institutions, whether those are nonprofit organizations or others, but have a strong reputation in the community, essentially social capital. And these are people who are oftentimes those leaders who have access to the community and know who's who. And most of the time, those leaders will know that technology education is very, very important. What they won't know is what or how to teach or how to plug people into the job market thereafter. And so that's how we've been able to expand, is creating partnerships with those types of entities operating locally within the favelas. If they don't, they'll have physical space, but if they don't, we help them to set up the computer labs. And then they help us with the recruitment process. And then we hire what we call a Jedi or a facilitator there to be the person who helps administer the course, and then we plug them into our online community, and that's how we've been able to expand and give exposure to those people in a new community of what it is that we're doing.
Thank you so much, Gary. I love this project. The day we met, not seeing me, I don't want to go close to the bird sound. So thank you so much, Gary, for being here with us and for sharing this amazing project you have in Brazil. I believe it's such inspiration for the ones that want to do business and create an opportunity in my country as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time. Hope to see you all in Atlanta soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.